It's all good. Thank you for joining us. I think we'll go ahead and
Yeah.
start our conversation. And I'm excited that Gigi, and I even saw that Storm Glore also registered for today's event. If he can make it in time, we're able to pop in and add some, by default, additional panelists on this topic who've helped with events. But as everyone was just filtering in, we were sort of celebrating and reflecting on how valuable it has been to be able to host virtual events, to be able to record, archive, pre-record, and all the different advantages that you get from being remote. We certainly miss the hallway conversations and so many different things, but it seems like this is a really exciting opportunity. So we wanted to set up at least a short conversation for educators on some of the best practices to set up an event, to take use of this new technology. And to fill everybody in, Alex and I had a quick conversation earlier this week to sort of lay out what we wanted to discuss today. And I was expecting a very easy, succinct, Alex, what are the three things that we need to lay out for everybody on an online event? And he was quick to point out that, it really is much more of a case by case basis. You need to look at the size, the needs, and the unique goals of any event to discuss what's going to be the most appropriate mix of technologies and platforms needed to deliver that content. So without having a immediate, here's what you do for an event, what I wanted to do is break down the MEIEA Summit briefly that we had earlier in October, that Alex, you were the lead developer behind, and we got your name from Storm and Gigi, who had done the Amplify Music event in April 2020. So we brought you on board, and you really led with here's what you should do and here's how you should do it. So the MEIEA Summit was supported by Zoom, Vimeo, and then we built a custom website to host all that content with Webflow. Can you talk about why those three platforms were used together to help push out that event?
Yeah, certainly. And I was wondering if I can share my screen here. I kind of put together a little bit of a more visual representation of the technology we used. And yeah, okay, I can. So yeah, so when kind of looking at the technology stack that we use for MEIEA, and when I'm breaking down any event for like all the technology we're going to use, I kind of think about all the needs we have and then what technologies are going to fulfill those. So in the case of MEIEA, we were in looking at a lot of these categories, multiple technologies fill those needs. What was important for MEIEA was that we had all these pre-recorded videos, and we were going to host them on our own website. So a lot of the pre-built platforms, like for example, something like Run the World, didn't allow us to host videos online before the event. So that's why we went with a service like Vimeo, which was really good for hosting video and letting us embed that video wherever we wanted on the web. And then Vimeo also had this cool live streaming product they just bought, this company called Livestream, that it's one of the only ways that we could embed our own live stream in our own site, and our own chat in our own site. So the goal with all the technology we did for MEIEA was to try to put everything into one website that we had total control over. So unlike these pre-built platforms where you log into their site and you kind of get their pre-built template, we wanted total control over how everything looked, how everything was laid out, and just how people experience the event. So the reason I went with Webflow as the website building platform was because it's really good with like a database. So the goal was to have a database of speakers and videos behind this event. And we wanted to be able to filter those videos by kind of the categories that we'd set out with. So Webflow is really good with that, building that database out, and something like Squarespace or Wix can't really do that as well. And additionally, Webflow kind of sits between something like Squarespace, which is like a click and drag kind of built website builder, and just custom coding your website. So you're not with Webflow, you're not clicking and dragging anything around, you're inputting numbers to build things. So a bit of a steeper learning curve on like the web development end. Um, but what it allowed us to do was when Armin came to me and was like, we don't want to use Eventbrite for ticketing because people have to sign in and it's a hassle. You know, can we build our custom ticketing right into the site? We could do that just because of the flexibility we had with Webflow and building the site. So that's how we ended up fulfilling the ticketing need.
Could I ask a background question real quick?
Yeah.
What initially, what is the value or advantage of putting your event onto its own separate URL and separate website? That seems like an incredibly common strategy amongst online events. While you're nominally used to visiting that organization or institution's, main webpage, many of them are building separate sites to host this content. What are the advantages that you get by doing that?
So in the case of MEIEA and other events, I think it's just depends on what platform the site was originally built on. So with MEIA's case, we are using something called Wild App, I believe, and it's kind of a membership platform, and it's built for a certain set of things. It's got kind of predefined pages, and what we needed with this was just ultimate flexibility. So basically, the key was we had this whole schedule on Schedule already from the in-person event. So we had all the speakers already there. We had, their title, their photo. We had this whole spreadsheet basically already done. With Webflow, I imported that spreadsheet and it automatically created 90 plus pages for me for every speaker. So saving me hours in the process, really. Yeah.
So we've got ticketing built into Webflow. We've got Sketch was maintaining the schedule. So, and then Vimeo, and that was an interesting feature. Vimeo lets you start stacking and archiving content prior to the date so you can have all of it organized. Um, how did Zoom play a role and how did Zoom interact with Vimeo?
Yeah, Zoom was an interesting one here. Originally, Vimeo was going to handle all of that. The plan was that we would just bring guests right into the Vimeo live stream, and that was going to be our cleanest signal. We were going to get the best video quality out of that. That was the goal. Um, I think something that's always important to keep in mind with virtual events is the success depends on how well you're educating the people coming and the speakers about the technology you're using. And honestly, Vimeo didn't put out the resources to I don't think, make people comfortable with their platform. And we didn't really have the time or budget to make those resources for them. And so we ended up using Zoom kind of for an ease of use, and people were already comfortable with it case. And I think that was really important. Even if we lost a little bit of quality, it helped the event kind of just go off smoothly. So I ended up plugging Zoom in. We had a Zoom call going in the background, which was great because everyone was kind of in this like green room space until we went live so people could talk about the panel that was coming up. Whereas if you're hosting a conference completely in Zoom, there's no space like that for people to chat before the panel. Everyone just kind of gets dumped in and you're like, here's the audience and you're going. So that ended up working out really well. Everyone could talk to each other, make sure everyone was good with the technology. I could check in with everyone. And then I could tell them, okay, we're going live now, and then put them into that Vimeo live stream. So that's kind of the way we use Zoom in that situation. And then we also did the breakout room sessions. And that was hosted just kind of outside of the MEIEA site, and we just had people join those. And I would say there's better networking tools out there in terms of virtual events. Someone like Hopin or Run the World has a really good, like, I guess, speed dating esque networking that's really cool, and that's kind of what they specialize in. But I think the Zoom breakout rooms worked well, even if it wasn't as integrated as some of those. Yeah.
Now we've got a small group today, so I think we can, in just a minute, sort of turn this into a roundtable and talk about technologies and talk about solutions. Um, I think I'd like to reflect on, one of the themes that we encourage in all of our students is a DIY mentality, right? If you're starting your career, if you're not sitting on a pile of financial resources, it might be very valuable to learn basic coding. It might be very valuable to learn basic video editing and all of these things in a
Mhm.
multimedia world. Is this mix of technology platforms, do you think, intuitive enough that the average professor could jump in and tie all these pieces together? I'm wondering, what's the complexity level? And also the second question, what do you think was your overall hourly contribution to pull this all off?
Yeah. So starting with the complexity level, it was I would say it was complex. It was especially learning Vimeo live stream. That was a totally new software. I used a lot of Adobe suites, so Premiere Pro, Photoshop, Illustrator. So those are programs that take time investment to learn for sure. Um, Zoom, I would say, is something that, if you're wanting to keep things simple. So I did an event totally on Zoom webinar in November, and it went pretty well. It's not, um, I think the biggest issue was that kind of green room thing I was talking about was one of the big issues that came up. So people kind of feeling thrown into things. Um, but you can do a lot with just Zoom, and if you know, Zoom doesn't have a great like tutorial really for like putting together a virtual event, which they should. Um, and, I think I'd like to make those materials, but basically just knowing what settings to use, and it's all something that can be learned easily within Zoom's case. But the stuff that's harder to learn is like making the graphics for the event. If you're talking about doing a full event start to finish, things like making the promotional graphics, putting like up a screen in between intermission and all that, just that extra level of polish is the stuff that increasingly starts taking more time. And in the case of Mia, we had, people's names in the bottom corner and the name of the session and all that stuff going on. And that's all the stuff that polish um, that takes a little more time investment. Yeah, Gigi?
Well, Alex, you are not one to toot your own horn. So I'm going to actually start there. But Alex came into this from being operations lead for UCLA Radio. So and had superpowers coming into this. So the ability to work with people, tell them nicely when they're being stupid. He's got just mad skills. But it really called to mind though that I'm not sure our average faculty person can do this, but you've got people at your school who can. So I would say I'm going to, Alex and a bunch of other students helped me relaunch and work on a podcast that there's ways to work with, for example, your local student radio station. And they've got students who are already working remotely and broadcasting, et cetera, who've got superpower skills. The other thing I would say from essentially also, Alex is available for hire. So I don't want to discount the fact this is a superpower that expecting the person who's speaking and talking to run it at the same time, I would suggest don't ever, ever do that. So where Alex has been a dream is that he's been able to keep all the balls in the air and catch things when they fall. And if you're actually running the class or the program, please don't do that yourself. That, whether it's you've got a great student in your class, but there's people in your classroom who could do this with you and pick up the ball and really explode it, whether it's, doing interviews with other people, like we were talking before some folks came on about how you can bring folks into the classroom, have students go out and pre-record the interviews or there's people you can empower, and then they've got portfolio assets to walk out the door with. But you need someone like Alex in the environment who understands the puzzle pieces, but also can be looking about a half hour in advance going, oh crap, Joe Smith hasn't come in yet. We need to make sure, where are they? Do I have someone to do that? And who understands kind of the tech and the puzzle and works the back channels. So I would suggest that any of us who want to do this, to not do it solo, but to realize you've got superpowers probably in your classroom who could love the portfolio assets that come out of this and relationships. And then someone, again, tooting Alex's horn. Alex is phenomenal at managing peers. And so something I don't always see in students, a lot of them want to be the sole banana, do stuff. Alex has superpowers of being able to maneuver diverse people with diverse tech skills. And I would also put into the mix that you'll have a portfolio of people, and you'll have some people at the high end and some people you're frightened drive cars. And so that you've got people who are going to be part of the environment, and they could be your digital native students and they could be your guests that need to be caught and helped. And having somebody in that role is crucial, whether it's finding the speaker who has the wrong time zone, or it's somebody's computer crashes right beforehand. So it's so valuable to have somebody like Alex, which could be one of your alums or one of your students, but Alex has really gone through this with Amplify, MEIEA, Music Policy Forums weekly stuff, Music Policy Forums intensive. So he's kind of learned the superpowers, has been able to then work with other people and train them up. So I love tooting Alex's horn. He is available for hire, and is right now have a portfolio of this stuff when he graduated after his time at UCLA Radio. So.
And I couldn't agree more, Gigi. And I was absolutely fishing a little bit with that question. Just speaking for MEIEA, there's no way we could have pulled this off without Alex's support. And yes, you could do a virtual event solely in a Zoom environment, but as an international organization that's been trying to court more members, partly just to build community for educators in such a difficult year, we knew we were going to have new people coming into the mix. We wanted it to be a positive experience, a supportive experience. It made all the sense in the world to develop a deep, branded, controllable, and in all of that branding, we also had sponsors that were supporting this effort. Being able to give them adequate visibility and recognition was crucial. So for us, it was worth absolutely the time investment. It was worth the financial investment of what we paid for a variety of these programs and Alex's time. And, the outcome was we had our highest attended event in history, right? I mean, it was a significant boost over an in-person event. And I think this is really exciting because some of our big national events have already said, you know what, we might not ever bring 100,000 people back to Austin. We might not ever bring, some of these big crowds. We won't do things the same way. I think the future will very much be a mix of great tactile in-person interactivity, but also leveraging the global distribution and reach that a great branded system like this could bring. Back to that question, Alex.
I was going to say, talking a lot of organizations, they're finding a 50% boost in event attendance doing it this way. And I want to pick up on what you said. Sorry to interrupt where you were going with it, but on Alex's great sheet, which Alex, I loved, it doesn't say sponsors. And talking to a lot of organizations after an event, the sponsor experience is massively important. And for some organizations has been a fail so far, that sponsors have that same breadth of, I'm really savvy to, I can't get out of my own way. And I know in talking, so I was going to cite the conference I talked to who told me not to say where it was, a major music conference, that they had some of their sponsors frightened at the technology and feeling stupid and felt very uncomfortable. So I think it sounds like you guys did a great job on that, but sponsors are wanting visibility, proof of visibility, but also maybe tech neutral at best. So.
Well, absolutely, Gigi, and I'm thrilled you're here because I want to pivot to a few questions with Amplify in just a minute. So, Alex, two things. Do you know what that exact hour commitment was, just so presenters and conference planners can get an estimate of, if I bring in somebody like Alex, if I build a team, what should I expect Obviously, these are not things that you can build overnight and have running within a week or so. I'd also like some insight into, we'll see those raw hours. Well, how did you divvy up that time? Because I think, speaking to Gigi's concerns for sponsors or just attendees, Alex, it bears letting everybody know that you made several videos walking not just the MEIEA organization, but our presenters, our speakers. So you also use some of your time to create training assets for using the system. And I know that really helped put everybody at ease and let everybody feel good about it. So what was that hourly time? Do you know?
Yeah. So I kind of have it as 130 hours total. And some events need certain things. And in this case, it was one of the big portions of the time was dedicated to building that site. That was like about 30 to 36 hours, I think, on just the site. And then there was another 20 hours just at the live event itself. Just being there a little bit before, a little bit after, and all the way through, managing and making sure everything was going smoothly. And so that leaves kind of that remaining 80 hours for the rest of those logistical things, which was creating, just setting up all these platforms, creating those training assets, making the live stream, all the graphics for that. The video content was a big portion. I didn't actually, unfortunately, split out what the hours were on that video content, but the video editing and exporting was a huge chunk of that time, probably at least half of it, I would say, if not more. So, doing those, so that, that's the advantage and disadvantage of pre-recorded video, right? We had some really high quality content, really crisp, basically presentations out of that, but it took some time on the front end to polish it up, put that sponsor branding on it and all of that. And those came out really nice, and putting people's, it's not like a Zoom call we put out there where the person's all tiny in the corner and their presentation's taking up the whole screen and it's just a slideshow. Putting those things side by side and making it look really nice. I think that was important, and those presentations looked really great. And, giving those people something that they were hopefully proud of at the end of it was important. So that was about half that remaining 80 hours at least.
Another thing that I think is important to bring up that we really appreciated, you also took all of our content post-event and helped us chop all of it up. So now it's living in YouTube, and we have a 180,000% better branding presence on YouTube. And so I think that's another thing for organizers to realize. If we do this right and we do those on-screen graphics, your event is going to go smoothly, but your event is also going to create the content that's going to help market and reinforce your brand, your stature in the community on down the road. Did you develop the audio mnemonic and the screen graphic that we've got in front of all of our YouTube videos? I love it.
Yeah,
I just used.
That was a really fun project to take on as part of this. And yeah, so and it was cool. Someone at the event was talking about audio branding as like their presentation, and I was just like, wow, I was kind of doing that without even really thinking about it. But yeah, making that little jingle, I guess, for the MEIEA animation. So basically I made the animation first and then synced a little bit of a sound music scape around the motions of that animation. Yeah.
Well, I haven't had a chance to thank you for that, but I just used that in a classroom. I used one of our discussions in a classroom the other day, and the students actually said it was cool. And so that was the first and last time that my students acknowledged something I was involved with was cool. So thank you for that, Alex. We started the day highlighting that there's some great platforms out there, but really trying to put on an online event is on a case-by-case basis. Different organizations, different conferences have different needs. Could we do some compare and contrast between how did you build out MEIEA, and then maybe we could talk about, well, what did you do differently for the first Amplify event? And then maybe both you and Gigi could share some insight into, I know you're changing the format for this next event coming up. What are the considerations you're looking at for that?
Yeah, I think with MEIEA, the great thing was that I think Amplify, what we had like 4 weeks, and it was kind of like, let's make this happen as best we can, and we're kind of the first wave of doing this. And what was great about MEIEA is we had a ton of lead time. We started that back in June, and we could kind of build. I kind of got to spend some time to think through what would be the ideal scenario for what we needed. So it is a little hard to compare. I think with a more time, Amplify might have looked different. But you know, it still went pretty well, but we learned a lot from that, and that was primarily done with Zoom. And yeah, and Gigi, feel free to jump in more about Amplify. But yeah, it was we just used Zoom and Slack, I would say, was the other big platform for Amplify. And that was when I was in that graph, you know, I was looking at, you know, attendee interaction is really important facet of the event. And a lot of that happened on Slack for Amplify, which had its advantages and disadvantages. I think the key disadvantage was being, you know, who knows what Slack is, and like, whoa, what the heck is this? It wasn't immediately accessible to a lot of people. And I think despite that, it went pretty well, but it wasn't something that we decided to consider for MEIEA.
And some of the things that, I mean, Alex and I joke about this with some frequency, that we watch other people's conference and go, ooh, I would not have made that choice. And so for a lot of them, and we found this out for Amplify, and I've watched this for other stuff, is the back channel among us is important. The people running it in the background have a way to get a hold of each other real time. So Slack was vital on running the backside of it, because you can't wait for that email to cut through someone's system. But Slack, we've seen so many people do back channels poorly for the guests, right? So Zoom, one of the problems is that, yeah, you can click the 3 buttons on the bottom right of the chat, which 90% of people still don't seem to know is there, and take the chat with you. But once that session's over, that conversation is gone. And one of the things we've been looking at for the next Amplify and looking at other people's stuff is, how do you keep the conversation going? Because if half the purpose is to connect up. So there's things like Bizzabo and Hova and other stuff that their whole superpower is that chat continues. And in some cases, they leave them open for like 6 months. And then some people take that and move it to a Q&A so that there's like a migration when the session is over. Some people pre-record like MEIEA did, and then make it so there's a Q&A possibility during the playback. So then there's the opportunity to talk about it. And then Music Tectonics has done a really great job with, once their sessions are over, that they immediately have a place for, you know, it's like in a real life event, someone wants to go talk to the speakers, that just moves immediately to another room, and then that chat continues. So the question of is the event just that half hour or that one day? How do you have a preamble and a postamble? But we've seen that be a disaster. But the other thing, which Alex's superpower is also at, is that, and he's been doing this with the Music Policy Forum weekly thing, which if you're not going to it, get on the list and go. Great session. Is that he actively feeds the chat. And most events do a really crappy job of that. So if someone mentions, I don't know, Mishagawa Amphitheater, whatever it is, that he's immediately ready with the conversation to dump the link in. So you don't have people going, what was that, et cetera, and it seeds conversation. And I would say that 90% of events have no one doing that they're instead just troubleshooting someone who can't get their camera running. And that is a really great addition, because someone, when they're done, can just download the chat and they have all of the content of the event. So that's a really great value add that Alex does in everything he does, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I really like mentioning the kind of post-event and pre-event longevity of it, because that was really crucial in what we built for MEIEA, was that we needed these videos to be up before the event, and we needed them to stay up after the event. And people still look at that summit site and they kind of get like a snapshot of what the event was, who was there. I mean, it's still a great reference. All the speakers are on there. If we'd used a platform like Run the World, which is something I did look at early on, that event would have lasted those 4 days and then been gone. And that page wouldn't have been accessible. Whereas we control everything here, even if we're not worried about like the company even, changing their business model or anything. So, that page can stay up as long as we want. So that was also really crucial for MEIEA.
And I want to wave that flag boldly, as again, Alex has heard this way too much from me recently, but many of these companies have changed their business model. So you might decide, oh, I'm going to do this in Hopin. So Hopin, we were looking to do Amplify, and we still might. They have a $99 for 100 guest model, and then you can pay 50 cents, but they're trying to move into a $10,000 minimum model. So you suddenly go, well, wait, I budgeted my event on X, and then Hopin now, I think they already had it, but I didn't notice. Yes, they have these great conversations, but when the event's over, the door is closed and your guests can never come back in, and you have to manually load all this stuff someplace else. So you've got all your assets sitting in someone else's house. Pathable was a $1,000 model, and they're now a $10,000 to $20,000 base model. Run the World was a lot more expensive, and they now have a freemium thing where you can actually have, I think, 100 people for free, but they're trying to ratchet into the next level, starts at $6,500. So you're going, okay, I'm betting my event in this thing, and suddenly they change their price points and they own all my assets, and my past event is sitting in their tools. The thing we found in Amplify, which we also joke around about, is that, okay, we have all these videos afterwards that we did in Zoom. Zoom has the superpower of, I can record a video, and then you gotta render and edit the damn things to put an intro, outro on them, etc. And between Alex and I, with our computers rendering at night to not bother our roommates and household members, and uploading, it was a couple weeks to get 39 videos up. So thinking the workflow, and that's the nice thing about putting it on Vimeo and other stuff, is the stuff's already out, and you're not and then I'm talking too much because this is Alex's show, but StreamYard is where we're moving some stuff into. And if you have a chance to play with StreamYard, that you can preset your intro, outro, you literally play it, it all records, has the bottom thirds, everyone's names on it, outro. When you're done, it's downloadable immediately. And you can actually live stream it out to YouTube at the time, actually as a private stream. That then captures it into YouTube, and then you can make it public at the time that you're having the event. So there's lots of things that you can do for some of this stuff that saves all that workflow stuff. So
I think it's
Alex,
interesting.
I was going to ask just one question of Alex. Sorry.
Please.
How much did the tech tools, because you talked about your time, how much did the tech tools cost for MEIEA?
Yeah, I think the total budget for the technology at MEIEA was 1,100, and that included the web hosting, the Webflow builder, and then Vimeo Premium. And I'm glad you mentioned StreamYard. I think their product is probably better than Vimeo in the live streaming space. I mean, the nice thing about Vimeo is that we had their whole video platform and their embed codes and all that for the site at the end of the day. But yeah, StreamYard is a really cool product for just doing live streams.
I was just going to say that it's interesting. I'm usually a major champion of technology. Look at this new platform, look at these new tools. But with some of what we've just shared in the last few minutes, we're almost making the case back to, oh my gosh, it's so much worth it all day, every day to really build this out yourself, have total control yourself, and then be able to have those pre and post assets and conversations. If you're looking at a platform that's charging 10,000 all in, we were around half of that for our event. And I think, we got quite a lot more value out of it than just running a 3-day event. There's some other people on the call here, so there's no reason not to sort of open this up. I'm wondering, from the group, questions you might have from Alex, or simply observations and things you've learned attending other events, putting on your own events, from anybody else. Responses so far.
I think if I was going to make a comment, it would be from a teacher standpoint. So I'm not sure that it fits with the conversation. I
It
haven't.
absolutely does. That's valuable. Please.
Well, from a teacher standpoint, anybody here that's a teacher knows that if you're teaching a synchronous class, how do you engage the people? But I guess that's true in a conference too, isn't it? It's not just a teacher thing. That's one of the biggest challenges is even with the chat box, which is certainly handy here, giving us some resources as we're having a conversation. But the whole thing of how do you, which is what you just did. Okay, let's get you guys to talk about your experiences. How do you get the people to participate? I think that's a never-ending thing that we'll be dealing with as in teaching and in conferences is how do you encourage the engagement and how do you make them feel warm and fuzzy that they really want to be there.
Well, again, I think that leads back to the value of custom building some of these opportunities. And it bears reminding, Gigi, all your comments earlier that there could be a student in your organization that would be primed for this. There could be groups of students that would be primed for this. And again, yes, some of our technology platforms have a lot of functionality, but to be able to have some live streaming, some video sharing, live chat and Q&A, plus the addition of later in the day for all the MEIEA events, we also had those cocktail hours. You needed a diverse array of experiences to keep people engaged. I was actually sort of surprised. We had really strong attendance across the whole day. And by golly, they were long days. I mean, it was 8 hours of content, and a very large majority of our attendees stayed for big chunks. It wasn't just a pop in and out type of experience. And I think that leads to that speaks to there was a variety of experiences and there was a team behind it, like Alex, really helping to custom build all of these pieces.
Yeah, and something that was fantastic about we got to see all that data because we custom built that site, we got to see, who was hanging out for how long. And that's such valuable information for potentially putting together the next event. You can even see as granular as like what pages were the most useful and most visited and like what do we need to build for next time. And some of these pre-built platforms won't necessarily give you all that info.
I was also going to suggest these also can be classes, so that you could design a class to essentially be a 10-week, 15-week, or lead up to a single day conference, bringing in your alumni, bringing in other people and having your students run it, and or having an alumni evening panel and your students could build these skills. We started, which Alex is one of the first people to walk through, an apprentice program at UCLA Herb Alpert, where students could get academic credit for doing some of this stuff in the background for projects on campus and now for classes, for virtual classes. But you could readily take, as some of us were talking, we get started here, speakers you would normally have come in and have your students do the running of this as if it's a conference session. The other thing which I did in the past 2 quarters is I had students actually using Zoom and other things to produce content. So getting them used to the tool set. So they were doing 10-minute presentations, recording voiceovers on it, sharing them asynchronously with classmates, and then giving feedback. So using a lot of these tools, but to do small production. And I already got a note back from one of my students that skill group that she developed in doing that for virtual classes, she's already done for the label she's working for showcasing their artists to investors. And her CEO was thrilled to pieces. She walked out of school able to immediately do this. And she was able to see, though, another 40 students work doing all of this. So walked out from producing things in class about what's happening using these same tools to walk right into her job with them. So big fan of that.
That makes all the sense in the world. As a matter of fact, that just started my own brainstorm here. Like, I know what I'm doing for class later this semester. Mark, I noticed you have a hand up. Do you have a question?
Hey, Alex. Well, hey, all. Yeah. I work with Henrik out of Sweden, although I'm based in the UK, and I work with Emily, who is also on the line there, and we're all working together on a conference that's going to be coming in May. And Alex, I just wanted to ask about the data that you said about when you said about you could kind of like get that granular detail. How long on average were people hanging around for each day? Was there like a number of hours per user, and were people dropping in and then leaving and then coming back? Was that something that was noticeable?
Yeah, and I will I'll try to pull up that data here, but I don't have it immediately on hand. But yeah, we did have from Vimeo, actually, we had data on how long on average people were spending, um, and it was surprisingly long. I think, and the thing we couldn't track is if someone, just refreshed the page, that would count as a new session. Um, but it was in the hours. I mean, it was like over 2 hours on average that people were spending at a time, on the event, which was really good, and more than we expected. I think we expected people to filter in and out a little bit more than that. So um, the Google Analytics was what gave us the data on the website. So what web pages people were visiting and for how long. And I don't have all that data in front of me, but I could certainly pull it up here.
No, that's cool. It was just that the part of the conversation we were having this week was when to start the sessions and how to space the sessions as well. Because what time of the year, when part of the academic year was it when you ran your conference?
It was right. Well, it was in October, and it's interesting, a decision that we made going. We initially thought, okay, we need to allow passing time. We need to allow that classic bathroom time. And when we first drafted our schedule, we had 15 minutes between everything, between every session, between every keynote, between every asset. But then suddenly we're realizing, oh my gosh, we're going to have a 10-hour day. We can't do that. And massaging the schedule, we went down to just a simple 5 minute and then, one or two 10-minute across the day. And we thought, well, maybe this isn't enough time, but we didn't hear a single complaint. And actually, I think maybe Alex, you could even attest, as somebody who was doing backroom operations the whole time, that just let the day flow. That made the day not be as long for you. I think we learned as an organization we could pack a lot more tightly than we thought, and no one complained.
Yeah,
That's
and people
really interesting.
yeah, people could just kind of come and go. They could have it, in their ear while, listening while doing something else. So the need for breaks is a lot less. I will say on the operation side, so my days, I basically was just had to have all my food at my desk to start the day. So that's just something to know, um, before you jump into running something like this. If you do pack that schedule tightly, either at a later conference, Music Policy Forum, we ended up having myself and one other person trade off those duties, so one of us could kind of get up and eat lunch or something. So it works well from the attendee side, and just being conscious of the people on the back end. It is a long day, and just knowing that ahead of time. Yeah.
Was the basis of the continuum and like leaving the 5 to 10 minute breaks, was that on the basis that you you knew that people would dip in and out of certain sessions given the content differentiation, or was that coming from a place where you kind of figured that people were just going to be locked in for the day, yeah, as if they were attending a physical conference rather than an online conference?
Yeah, the main reason of the 5 minute breaks between basically every session was to get people into the Zoom call and make sure they were good to go with the session that was about to happen. And that was so key, as I was saying earlier, because another conference, people just get thrown in, like the next session starts immediately because we're all on Zoom webinar and there's not really a way to do a break. And it can just feel a little discombobulating, especially for the people who are coming in, just feel kind of thrown into it. So That was the reason for the 5-minute breaks, is we were in the background checking in with everyone, making sure everyone got in the call. Is someone not here? Let's message them, let's give them a call. Those were the sort of things that were happening in those 5 minutes.
I was
Yeah,
going to
I
comment,
think,
or I put in
please.
the chat that several organizations have taken advantage of those spaces to pre-record other content. So whether it might be musicians that you're working with, there's been some beautiful music interludes at several conferences I've been at. I've gone to one where it had pre-recorded magicians, which was like, this is weird. And by the second one, oh, cool, magician. So that it adds to it boosts the energy back up for the next session without the operators having to do anything. Having pre-recorded snippets to do interstitials is a nice superpower to have in the background.
You know, I think, Mark, just to continue on this, and Gigi, thank you for bringing that point up. I think when we were planning out this schedule, we were still so entrenched in a live format paradigm that, well, of course you have to have breaks and you go get the cup of coffee and you go do, but Alex is right. You know, especially if you're dealing with a lot of pre-recorded content, people do sit there. It's in a separate window on their desktop. It's on a different monitor. It's just in an earbud. You could really pack something tightly. As both a moderator and a panelist for different periods of time, it was great to get into the Zoom call, the green room, as Alex was referring it to it. So having a couple minutes of the previous people can log out of the call, the next people can log in. It wasn't live. Alex or other people who are handling the organization could all say, okay, we're going to go live in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Everybody could get their material together. So if there's live portions, that a few minutes of passing time was great. Now, what's interesting, Gigi, to your point, we were thinking and we were planning on putting some music interludes in between some of our sessions. We did a bunch of outreach to students. We actually started collecting pre-recorded video pieces from MEIEA members all over the place. And as we got into the planning, we still realized, oh my gosh, that is a bridge too far. We do not have the time to jump in and do that. And so I think to anyone planning something, excuse me, planning an event like this, we were working on our schedule. You know, in March, we tapped Alex and started working with him in June, and it still felt like a sprint to pull all of this together by October. It was more work than we thought. And actually, the MEIEA board has joked that we met more in the second half of 2020 working towards this event than we had in the previous 4 years as a board. Henrik can certainly speak to that. I mean, it got to the point that just the litany of things to try and pull this together was weekly meetings, subcommittees, lots of shared checklists. The result, though, you know, and Gigi, you said this earlier, was, you know, twice the attendance of the last in-person event that we had. All day, every day, I think we would acknowledge that the effort, the branding, the time we put into it was certainly worth it. But oh my gosh, was it a lift? And no way could we have done it without the support of people like Alex.
And I want to say one more thing on this is that the one thing we haven't mentioned other than Alex had on his great sheet, Google Suite, the backend organizing can be a muddy mess. And for people who do professional high-end organizations, there's tools for that too that cost a lot of money or are embedded in their system. So whether it's speakers said yes, do we have their picture? Did we put that up? Do we have the asset? Did they confirm that you end up with a, at best, complex Google spreadsheet miasma on the back? And there are tools for that, but that's where it also goes down the rabbit hole, and you're also at the mercy of the least tech person on your team. So everyone's got to be able to come in and say, did Joe Smith agree to speak? Have we gotten his bio? Did it get put on the site? And Alex, I don't know if I've seen that with what we've worked on. What have you seen on that side of it with MEIEA, with music policy, as to kind of the backside of water, Disneyland metaphor?
Yeah, I think with Amplify, it's a bigger team now, and maybe needing those kind of, so we're talking about like platforms like Monday and like something like Trello, or kind of project management, project organization software. I think that definitely has a place if you've got a big team, I would say, at least, more than 4 people, to kind of make sure, see what everyone's tasks are, what everyone's doing. Both MEIA and Music Policy Forum, we kind of did all that organization in Slack, just by sending messages back and forth. And it's by no means the ideal tool, but it's certainly better than email. It's kind of in between. But yeah, I think adding that layer, if people are technologically comfortable, something like Trello, especially if you're working with like students, is really good to have that structure in there, for people to kind of track what's being done, what is blocking something else that needs to be done. So this needs to get done first. You can assign people to those things. So I would like to use that software when possible, but for the past 2 conferences, I think the team's been small enough that management hasn't gotten out of hand to that point.
Although, just to unpack for Mark and Henrik and Emily, who are about to do an event, we launched our Slack account at least a month before the event to start all of that shared knowledge, shared conversation, dotting I's, crossing T's, umlauts for our European friends. So that really became a valuable archive to have in place. Slack wasn't just running during the event. We really pulled to that earlier. And then, Gigi, you were talking about bios and pictures and all of that. One of the decisions that led us to build our schedule in Sketch was it seems to have such a high adoption in the academic community that something on the order of 70% of our panelists and participants already had their content and assets in Sketch. So if you go into Sketch, okay, Gigi, that's great, a $250 nonprofit rate. We were finding everybody already existed there. So then we wouldn't have to collect a lot of that content. And then we would just add the 30 or so new people into that platform. This has been great conversation. Anybody? Any more questions or thoughts from the team here?
I can just can't see Emily, but I can almost hear her kind of go, "This is my world. Yeah, you're explaining my world to me." Well, we're going back on the music side of it, because we're incorporating this as part of a showcase festival. What we're thinking about doing is actually having the previous night's showcase gigs that were live streamed the previous evening, breaking up the panels. So it's a case of like hour-long discussion, flip over to a band from Switzerland that played last night, back into the panel, and things like that, just to kind of keep the flow moving as well. Emily just like, I'm trying to do too many things at once. Welcome to her world.
Sorry, I just thought it's too much noise. I got broccoli here and stuff, so I just thought I'm just staying in the background and enjoying everything, but not really participating today. I'm sorry.
It's the question, though, the classic question: are you making enough for all of us? And with overnight shipping, how quickly could we taste something wonderful?
That's the thing. I guess that's one of the questions when you do a festival or conference. How are you going to enjoy what I'm doing here at your home? I guess I could pre-cook everything and send it to you, but I don't think it would be very nice once it crosses all the waters.
Well, that's way better. Saying that you're cooking is way better than one time I had asked everybody to give an answer to something. And then I haven't had a student say, "What was the question again?" I was brushing my teeth. So I'd rather hear about your cooking than that.
Well, I just wanted to, again, we're sort of hitting our hour, and we usually try to keep these events at an hour, just a little bit more. A couple of things I want to highlight today. Alex, thank you so much for coming and sharing your time and your expertise today. We really appreciate it. And to Mark and Henrik and Emily, between Alex and myself, I'm sure we could plumb and find some of our specific data points, and we're happy to share those with you. Log into those systems and review that. We'll try to get that to you if we can. But just for all of you joining these events, sharing what you've learned, what you've seen, Gigi as well, we really take pride in being able to host these events, bring people together, and brainstorm for our institutions, brainstorm for our programs, and ultimately brainstorm so that we can help all of our students and our participants move forward. So, Alex, thank you for joining us today. And then, oh my goodness, I know we've said this a lot, but thank you for all of the hard work that you put into the MEIEA Summit this year. And also thank you for all the insight and training that you gave to the board and all of our community members, because it's really going to empower us to do more of this, continue it, and also for the work that you're doing with Amplify, because I can't wait to go check that out into the future.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for inviting me to this. It was really cool to organize all the thoughts around how to build something like this out. And I shared that that table I made in the chat here, if you want to go download that file and look at that.
Well, Alex, thank you so much. Mark, Henrik, Emily, Denise, thank you all. Stan, good to see you.
Thank you. Glad to see everybody.
Take care, team. Great to see you.